Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when country music legend Reba McEntire walks onto The View expecting a friendly chat about her new tour, but ends up face-to-face with Joy Behar in a heated clash over one of the most controversial topics in America? Should churches be taxed? The audience expected charm, laughter, and maybe a quick song. But what they got was one of the boldest, most unexpected exchanges daytime television has seen in years. It started when Joy, with her trademark grin, joked that some of these megachurch pastors live better than movie stars. Reba laughed politely at first, but then her tone shifted. Faith isn't a business, Joy. It's where people go to heal. The room went quiet. What followed was a fiery, emotional, and surprisingly raw debate about money, morality, and faith in modern America. Joy argued that if churches act like corporations, they should pay like corporations. Reba pushed back, insisting that the heart of the church isn't profit, it's people. Audience reactions swung like a pendulum, cheers, gasps, even a few murmurs of prayer. By the time the segment ended, both women were standing, voices shaking, not from anger, but from conviction. The clip would go viral within hours. Some said Reba spoke truth to cynicism. Others said Joy dared to challenge hypocrisy. But what happened next, you wouldn't believe.
The lights came up bright as the familiar View theme played, and the audience roared with energy. Whoopi Goldberg smiled wide as she welcomed the viewers. Our next guest is a country icon, a living legend, and someone who has been inspiring people for over 4 decades. Please welcome Reba McEntire. Reba stepped out in a tailored red blazer, rhinestones catching the light, her auburn hair perfectly curled. The crowd went wild, clapping and whistling as she waved with that unmistakable Southern charm. "Well, y'all sure know how to make a girl feel welcome," she laughed, her Oklahoma twang warm and disarming. Whoopi beamed. "You've done it all. Music, acting, Broadway, business. You're like the country music version of a superhero." Reba chuckled. I don't know about that. I just try to stay busy and keep counting my blessings." Sonny Hostin jumped in. "And your new tour is selling out everywhere. People still love that Reba touch." "Thank you kindly. I've been real lucky," Reba said, smiling graciously. The conversation began light. Music, touring, and her experience mentoring young country artists. But sitting across the table, Joy Behar watched her closely, fingers steepled under her chin, a faint smirk playing on her lips. Finally, Joy spoke. "Reba, you've always been outspoken about your faith, right?" Reba nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Faith's gotten me through everything in life. I wouldn't be here without it." Joy tilted her head. "So I gotta ask, how do you feel about churches being tax-exempt when some of them make millions of dollars a year? Shouldn't they be paying taxes like everyone else?" The air changed instantly. Reba didn't flinch. She smiled, but there was steel behind her eyes. "Well, Joy, I believe churches do more good than harm. They help folks, feed the hungry, comfort the sick, give people hope when they've lost everything. That's not a business, that's a blessing." The audience clapped softly, sensing tension under the politeness. Joy leaned back, unconvinced. "Sure, some do good things, but a lot of these megachurch pastors are flying private jets and living in mansions. How's that serving the poor? Sounds like a business to me." Reba smiled at her. "Now, if we're going to talk fairness, then let's talk about where that money goes. Churches keep doors open for folks who got nowhere else to go. They don't turn away the broken or the lost." Whoopi nodded, trying to ease the tension. "You know, this is what I love, when people can disagree without tearing each other apart." But Joy wasn't done. She leaned forward, voice sharp. So, okay, let's say you're right. Why should a church that makes $100 million a year get the same tax break as a small-town chapel? I'm not saying faith is bad, I'm saying the system is rigged. Reba's expression hardened slightly, though her tone stayed soft. I hear what you're saying, Joy, but the way I see it, if you start treating churches like corporations, you'll lose what makes them sacred. They'll become just another business, and that would break a lot of hearts in this country. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Joy raised an eyebrow. So you think it's fine for rich pastors to dodge taxes while teachers and nurses pay their fair share? Reba's smile vanished. No, ma'am. I think it's wrong for anyone to take advantage of people's faith. But I also think it's wrong to punish millions of good people for the greed of a few. That line earned a round of applause. Whippy looked between them. Okay, now we've got a real conversation. Joy shrugged, half smiling. Oh, I'm just asking questions. Don't shoot the messenger. Reba leaned in slightly, her voice steady but pointed. Sometimes, Joy, the way you ask the question shows the answer you already believe. The audience gasped softly, not in hostility, but in surprise at Reba's directness. Joy blinked, surprised. Well, that's one way to look at it. Whippy chuckled nervously, glancing at the producers off camera. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break, but something tells me this conversation's just getting started. As the music swelled and the cameras faded to commercial, Reba and Joy exchanged a look across the table. Not quite anger, not quite respect, but something charged and unmistakably personal. And when they came back from break, the sparks would turn into a wildfire.
When the cameras came back from commercial, the energy in the studio had shifted. The crowd was buzzing, sensing that something real was about to unfold. Joy Behar adjusted her notes. Reba sat poised with that polite, almost unshakable smile, and Whoopi gave a quick warning glance to both sides before saying, "All right, welcome back to The View. We're talking about a big question. Should churches be taxed?" Reba smiled graciously. "Well, I'll tell you what I think. We're a country built on freedom of faith. You start taxing churches, you start blurring that line. Next thing you know, the government's telling pastors what they can preach and what they can't." That line drew applause from the audience, mostly older viewers in the front rows who nodded approvingly. Joy Behar leaned forward, voice crisp. "Reba, with all due respect, nobody's saying people can't practice their faith. We're saying the government shouldn't subsidize religion, especially when some of these churches act more like luxury brands than places of worship." Reba's smile faded just slightly. "I get that concern, Joy, truly. But you can't lump everyone in together. The local church in Tulsa or Baton Rouge isn't flying around in jets. They're holding bake sales just to keep the lights on." Sonny nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair, but what about accountability? If churches want to keep their exemptions, shouldn't there be transparency about where donations go?" Reba turned towards Sonny. "Transparency's a good thing, sure. But accountability's already there. It's called the community. If a preacher's doing wrong, folks know. Word spreads fast. You can't hide from your congregation." Joy interrupted, her tone sharper now. "Oh, come on, Reba. That might work in small towns, but in these giant mega churches, people are being sold a fantasy. They're told to donate what little they have while the preacher drives home in a Rolls-Royce." Reba's eyes narrowed slightly, though her tone stayed measured. "And yet, Joy, those same folks will tell you that church is where they found hope again, where they beat addiction, where they got food when their fridge was empty. That matters." The audience clapped again, louder this time. Joy's lips tightened. "Hope is great, but hope doesn't pay for hospitals or schools. Taxes do. We can't keep pretending churches are all charitable just because they say they are." Reba leaned in. "You keep talking about pretending, Joy, but faith isn't pretend to millions of Americans. It's real. It's what keeps people going when the world gives up on them." That line landed hard. Whoopi tried to step in. Okay, I love both of you, but we're starting to sound like Sunday morning and Sunday evening service here." The crowd laughed, easing the tension for a beat, but only a beat. Joy wasn't letting go. "Look,
I don't care if people believe in God or not. Believe in whatever helps you sleep at night. But when religion becomes a business, when it starts collecting millions, it should be taxed. Period. Reba turned toward her, eyes calm but unwavering. You're looking at this through numbers, Joy. I'm looking at it through people. You tax churches, and it's not the big mega churches who will suffer, it's the little ones, the ones in neighborhoods that already got nothing. That drew a murmur of agreement from the audience. Joy crossed her arms. So we just let the big ones off the hook because we're afraid to hurt the little ones? That's not justice, that's cowardice. That word, cowardice, made Reba's expression freeze. She didn't raise her voice, but her reply carried weight. I don't think it's cowardice to protect something sacred. My mama used to say, don't tear down a fence till you know why it was built. Churches have stood as shelters in storms, literal and spiritual. You start taxing them, you tearing down that fence. Whoopi nodded slowly, impressed. That's a powerful way to put it. Joy smirked slightly. Nice metaphor, Reba, but the fence you're talking about also protects corruption. You can't deny that. Reba didn't hesitate. I can't deny there's corruption in the world, Joy, but I can promise you this, it doesn't just live in churches. It lives in politics, in corporations, even in television studios. The audience gasped, and for the first time, Joy looked rattled. Whoopi's eyes widened. Oh, Lord, she muttered under her breath, half laughing, half praying this wouldn't explode further. Joy shot back. Are you implying I'm corrupt, Reba? Reba gave a small, kind smile. No, honey, I'm just saying if we start pointing fingers, we might all need to pay a little more attention to what's in our own backyard. The audience applauded, some rising to their feet. Whoopi stepped in before the exchange could spiral further. All right, let's take a breath here. This is the view, not the cage match. Reba laughed softly, diffusing some of the heat. I'm just here for a good conversation, Whoopi. Oh, me too. I love a good debate, especially with someone who thinks God is their accountant. Reba looked at her, the humor fading again. And I love a good debate with someone who thinks faith has a price tag. The camera caught the tension perfectly. Two women, two worlds, neither backing down. The segment was running long, but producers didn't dare cut it short. The clash had turned personal, philosophical, and deeply American. And as Whoopi leaned toward the camera with a nervous smile saying, "We'll be right back," the audience stayed locked in their seats, not wanting to miss whatever came next. Because everyone in that room knew this wasn't just about taxes anymore. It was about belief itself.
When the show returned from break, you could feel that thin, charged silence that comes when something real is cracked open. Joy Behar was sitting back in her chair, still clearly simmering, while Reba McEntire had her hands folded neatly on her lap, a picture of calm, but with eyes that said she wasn't finished. Whoopi tried to lighten the mood. All right, we're back on The View, and things are getting a little, spirited. Reba, Joy, let's see if we can keep this friendly before the coffee cups start flying. The audience laughed, but the tension didn't break. Joy jumped in first. You know, Reba, I respect your career. You've earned your success. You've done a lot of charity work. I'll give you that. But this idea that churches can't survive if they're taxed, that's just fear-mongering. Plenty of organizations pay taxes and still do good work. Reba nodded. They do, but the church isn't a business, Joy. It's a place where people come to heal. You start treating it like a corporation and you take away its heart. Joy leaned forward, pressing. But what about when the church acts like a corporation? Some of these preachers own mansions, Reba. They use private jets. They ask for 10% from people who can barely afford rent. Reba's jaw hardened. And that's wrong. I'm not defending greed. I'm defending faith. You can't punish every believer in this country because a few preachers forgot who they were serving. The crowd applauded, and Reba's southern accent seemed to grow stronger, her conviction clearer. Joy's voice rose a notch. You keep calling it faith, Reba, but faith doesn't keep the lights on in hospitals or fix bridges. Taxes do. This country's fallen apart while we hand billion-dollar exemptions to religious institutions. Reba's jaw tightened, and for the first time she spoke with a hint of anger. Joy, I've walked into churches in Tennessee where the roof was leaking and the pews were splintered, but those people still showed up every Sunday. They prayed for their sick neighbors. They raised money for kids' medicine. You think that doesn't hold this country together? You're wrong. Her voice cracked just slightly, and that small break made the studio go still. Sonny leaned in gently. Reba, I hear your heart in that, I really do. But if the system's broken, shouldn't we fix it instead of pretending it's fair? Reba looked at her. Fix it, sure, but don't destroy it. Once the government starts taxing faith, they're not going to stop at megachurches. They'll go after synagogues, mosques, temples. You give Washington that kind of power, and you'll never get it back. The crowd clapped again, louder this time, some people even whistling. Joy's smile tightened. Let me ask you something, Reba, she said, her tone icy. Do you really think God needs a tax break? A few gasps rippled through the audience. Reba turned toward Joy, meeting her stare. No, Joy, God doesn't need anything from us, but people do. And churches, the real ones, not the flashy ones, are the last place some folks have to turn when the world forgets them. The camera caught her expression, steady, almost defiant. It wasn't about celebrity anymore. It was about belief, about what America meant to her. Joy didn't blink. I'm not anti-faith, Reba. I'm anti-special treatment. We tax everyone else. Why should religion get a free pass? Reba's reply was soft, but it carried. Because some things aren't supposed to have a price tag, Joy. Faith isn't merchandise. Hope isn't taxable. The studio broke into applause again, and even Whoopi had to admit under her breath, that's a pretty good line. But Joy wasn't finished. You keep romanticizing it, Reba. Meanwhile, some of these churches push politics from the pulpit. They tell people how to vote, then claim to be nonpartisan. You really think that's holy? Reba sighed, and for the first time her tone turned sad instead of defensive. I think the world's gotten so divided, Joy, that even kindness looks suspicious. But if you take away the church, if you take away the one place where people still gather to pray, to sing, to believe in something, you'll lose a lot more than tax dollars. There was a pause. Then she added quietly, you'll lose what makes us a community. The studio fell silent. Even Whoopi had to hesitate, sensing that emotional edge. Reba looked down briefly, her voice softer now. I lost my mama a few years back, and the people who showed up for me weren't lawyers or politicians. They were church folk, people who cooked meals, sang hymns, and sat with me when the house felt too quiet. If that's not worth protecting, I don't know what is. It was one of those moments where the whole room seemed to breathe together. The audience applauded, long, heartfelt applause. Joy looked at her, conflicted. You could tell she respected the emotion, even if she didn't agree. Then she said almost gently, that's a beautiful story, Reba, but personal pain doesn't make good policy. We can't build a nation on feelings alone. Reba straightened up, that steel creeping back into her smile. And we can't build one by forgetting where compassion comes from. The audience roared again, standing this time. Whoopi raised her hands, laughing nervously. Okay, let's breathe, people. I need oxygen over here. But Joy and Reba were still staring at each other, two women from opposite worlds, neither willing to back down. And as the show cut to another commercial, Joy muttered just loud enough for the mic to catch it. I swear, these country singers always bring church to daytime TV. Reba smiled faintly, never breaking her gaze. Well, Joy, maybe that's exactly what America needs. The screen faded to black.
When the cameras came back on, the tension in the View studio felt like a live wire. The audience had settled into a nervous buzz, whispering, glancing between Joy Behar and Reba McEntire like they were waiting for the next spark to fly. Whoopi tried, once again, to bring things down a notch. All right, before y'all tear each other to pieces, she said with a half smile, let's try to unpack this without anyone needing confession after. Laughter scattered through the room, but Reba didn't laugh. She sat upright, calm but visibly bracing herself. Joy leaned back, pen in hand, tapping it against her notes like she was about to go for the kill. "Reba," Joy began, "I get that faith means a lot to you, but when you start saying churches should be untouchable, you're basically saying they can play by their own rules. That's not freedom, that's favoritism." Reba turned toward her, voice steady. "I'm saying that faith shouldn't be something the government regulates like a toll booth. There's a difference between oversight and control." Joy smirked. "Yeah, but tell that to the small businesses who got crushed during the pandemic, while some churches stayed open tax-free. You think that's fair?" A few people in the audience murmured in agreement. Reba's expression hardened. "Fairness isn't about cutting everyone down to size. It's about lifting people up when they've got nowhere else to turn. Some of those churches fed entire towns when the government checks stopped coming in." Joy shot back quickly. "And some of those same churches took pandemic relief loans and donations, double-dipping under the name of God. Don't you see the hypocrisy?" Reba leaned forward now, eyes sharp. "You talk about hypocrisy, Joy, but what about Hollywood lectures on compassion from people who fly private jets to climate conferences? Every world's got its sinners. But I'd rather stand beside a flawed preacher trying to help his town than a politician pretending to save the world." The crowd gasped, half cheering, half shocked at the bite in her tone. Whoopi blinked. "Wow," she said slowly. "So now you're lumping me in with hypocrites?" "I'm saying you're missing the heart of what faith does. You can mock the idea of God all you want, but for millions of people, that faith is the only thing keeping them alive." The word mock hit Joy like a slap. Her tone sharpened. "Don't you dare say I mock God, Reba. I question institutions that abuse power. There's a difference." Reba nodded, unfazed. "Then maybe question the people, not the faith itself." The tension was thick enough to cut. Whoopi rubbed her forehead, muttering something about needing a drink. Sonny tried to step in. "Ladies, maybe there's a middle ground here." But Joy wasn't done. "Reba, this whole protect the faith argument sounds noble until you realize how much money we're talking about. We're not talking about the corner church in Nashville. We're talking about empires, billion-dollar empires that don't pay a cent in taxes, while the rest of us foot the bill." Reba's patience snapped a little. "Then go after the empires. Don't burn down every chapel in America just because a few of them lost their way." The audience broke into applause again, louder this time. But Joy didn't even look at them. She leaned closer, voice low, biting. "You ever wonder if maybe people hold on to faith because they're afraid of reality?" That line crossed something invisible. Reba's eyes flashed, not angry, but deeply hurt. "Joy," she said softly, "you ever wonder if people like you stop believing because they're too proud to need anything bigger than themselves?" The audience exploded. A mix of cheers, gasps, and even a few stunned shots filled the air. Whoopi's mouth dropped open. Joy's face flushed red. "So now I'm godless? You don't know a damn thing about what I believe." Reba shook her head. "I'm not judging your soul, Joy. I'm saying faith isn't weakness. It's what gives ordinary folks strength when life's too heavy to carry alone." Joy stood up halfway, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "And I'm saying blind faith is what gets this country in trouble. You wrap yourself in religion and forget the Constitution." Whoopi raised her voice, trying to cut in. Okay, that's enough." But it was too late. Reba rose to her feet too, her voice suddenly sharp and commanding. "And you forget that without faith, Joy, this country wouldn't have a constitution. Those rights you keep defending came from people who believed freedom was God-given, not government-granted." The crowd roared. It was chaos. People clapping, some booing, others shouting over each other. Joy looked stunned for a beat, then laughed in disbelief.
Oh my God, you really believe that, don't you? Reba didn't blink. With all my heart. The camera zoomed in on their faces, Joy's eyes blazing, Reba's steady and unyielding. Whoopi finally threw her hands up. We need a break. Please, a commercial before this turns into Sunday service versus Sunday satire. The lights dimmed, the applause sign flickered, and as the theme music rolled, Joy turned to Reba with a tight smile and muttered, "You just gave America a sermon they didn't ask for." Reba smiled back, calm as ever. Maybe, Joy, but maybe it's one they needed. The screen faded to black, leaving viewers everywhere holding their breath, wondering what would happen when they came back from commercial.
When The View returned from its final break, the tension had cooled, but it hadn't vanished. The air still hummed with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. The audience sat quietly, waiting to see how the two women would finish what they started. Joy Behar spoke first. Her tone was measured, almost weary. "You know," she said, "these conversations aren't easy. We can sit here and yell about taxes and politics all day, but at the end of it, we're really just arguing about what kind of country we want to be." Reba nodded, her voice gentler now. "That's true, Joy, and I think deep down we all want the same thing, a country that looks out for its people and keeps a little room for faith." There was a soft murmur of agreement from the audience. Whoopi leaned forward. "You two just went a few rounds that could make pay-per-view money," she joked. "But I gotta say, it's good to see passion come from both sides." The tension broke slightly. Reba chuckled. "I'm not mad at Joy. I respect her for standing her ground. That's what makes America strong. We can disagree and still shake hands when it's over." Joy smiled, just a hint of it, but it was real. "I'll give you that, Reba. You're tough. I didn't think a country singer could handle me without a guitar." The audience laughed, and Reba grinned. "Honey, I've handled rowdy crowds in Texas honky-tonks. This ain't so bad." The laughter turned to applause, long, warm, genuine. Sonny added softly, "I think what we saw today is what's missing out there. People arguing, yes, but actually listening too." Reba looked out toward the crowd, her eyes glistening. "That's all I was trying to say. You don't have to be religious to believe in grace. You don't have to go to church to understand compassion. But you do have to care about each other, or none of it works." The studio went quiet. Then someone in the front row stood up, clapping. Within seconds, the entire audience followed. Joy looked at Reba, shaking her head in admiration. "Well," she said, "if we ever tax sermons, you'll owe the IRS a fortune." Reba laughed, placing her hand on her heart. "I'll pay it gladly, as long as it goes to the folks who need it most." The show wrapped on that note. Two women, smiling through exhaustion, proving that even after the fiercest arguments, respect could still find its way to the surface. By that evening, the segment was everywhere. Headlines called it "Faith Meets Fire, Reba versus Joy in The View's most honest debate yet." Social media buzzed, half cheering Reba's conviction, half praising Joy's blunt truth. But no one could deny one thing. For 15 minutes that morning, America had stopped scrolling, stopped arguing online, and just listened. And as the final shot of the episode replayed, Joy and Reba shaking hands beneath the studio lights, one question echoed across millions of screens. What if the rest of the country could do the same? If you enjoyed this powerful moment, make sure to subscribe for more dramatic celebrity showdowns, emotional debates, and unforgettable moments from the world's most unpredictable talk shows.